in 2016, I actually went there for a couple of months with my daughter, and we embarked on a very interesting experience doing indigo dyeing. And it's in the outskirts of Tokyo. And in that time, I didn't expect to be doing all the things I was doing there because it was just my first time. There I was in the countryside, and they were growing tea right outside the garden. And it was a three-story farmhouse, and several, at that time, several local Japanese, a lot of them older people, coming to do tapestry weaving with my guru. And it was just me and my daughter doing indigo dyeing with these huge bats. So it was every day. It was every day working from morning till evening, sometimes even till 1 a.m. Sewing, 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 sewing. It was just amazing. And it's called shibori. I think a lot of people who really love that art form would really recognize that. So and it was not only about, I was telling you before, Stephanie, that it's not only about doing the art form itself, but it's the total experience of being in a quiet, serene place, being in a countryside where you're surrounded by nature, working working every day in a meditative pace, and cleaning, being part of cleaning, cooking, gardening with our guru, and working with other artists and understanding what they do. And sometimes some fashion designers would come over, especially the really famous ones, because they really adored our guru. So you can imagine the exposure I had was just really very unparalleled and quite unique. So I really quite enjoyed that. The Japanese in general, I think, are quite strict with, even in their art form, they have a specific way of doing things. Even with ceramics, which I've been doing for 30 years as well. You know, even in making tea bowls, there's a specific way of making the tea bowl. Certain parts of the lip, which for ceremonial tea bowl has to be slightly dented so that it's just very particular to making a tea bowl. And even they measure everything in millimeter, the way in a tea bowl, how tall it should be, how wide. So in a way, although there is a fluid artistic creativity to it, they really have certain regulations and certain rules that they follow. And same also with the art of shibori or indigo dyeing. They have specific kinds of designs that they follow because of tradition and history. So that's actually quite normal. But one day I said to my master, if I could do something super freehand, which is really for me, which is a very interesting creative process of just sewing it the way I want, circles, ovals, and just really very fluid. In the beginning, he was like, "What? Why would you like to do that?" He was like this, right? And I'm like, "Because it's fun, and I'd like to do something different." He goes, "No, it's not gonna work." And I said, "Would you please let me try?" And in all respect, I asked him, "Can you please let me try?" And at the end, he said, "Please go ahead. Let's see how the outcome would be." And we were surprised how really nice it came out. And since then, I think he started thinking to himself, maybe there's also a different way of doing things. So I think he really, since then, actually, he also invites artists and other people who do textiles to come and experiment in his studio, because I think it really opens the doors to more creativity.
And
Yes, Stephanie, I did. And as a matter of fact, I think some 5 years ago, I had actually bought a very old piece of Boro, pretty much tattered already, mended probably by fishermen and farmers. But today, what used to be something practical became an art form and very much revered by the Japanese. So I bought this one piece because I felt that for me, was something interesting. And I remember being together with Maya Munoz and Ling, Kisumbing, and it was underneath. I had kept it just so quietly underneath my bed, a little box, which I felt was so precious. I just took it out and I said, Maya, would you like to see something? And Ling, when I pulled it out, Maya screamed, "Oh my God, it's a Boro." So she knew since then what a Boro was. And we looked at it in so much detail. We looked at it back and forth, looked at how afraid it was, how really interesting the patina. And we were like crazy people, really admiring this tattered thing. But for me, it had so much soul in it. And so Maya and Ling said, let's do a Boro show. Let's call Tina of Art Informal and do a Boro show with her. And let's ask Steph to curate it for us. So that's how that seed came about. And I guess 3 years ago, before COVID, we all said, let's do it. And 2 years hence, here we are.
Focusing.
I'm a collector of many things. And just like when I did my ceramics, I would buy a lot of old, because I like old things that have history and some kind of soul in it. So I got a lot of vintage vases, which I used for my flower exhibitions, my seed exhibitions. I would intertwine old obi belts, which I would find just thrown away in the secondhand flea market in Tokyo, and I used those found objects to intertwine and weave them into my story. And I find that it's always interesting to do that, because from something that used to be maybe used for example, a wedding kimono that had that beautiful obi belt, it's now in that little box that's being sold, and I felt, let's put it back into art and bring it back some life. Similarly, I did the same with buttons, because buttons for me, which I also love to use, are the little Bakelite buttons, which are the 1930s, very famous buttons, made the first plastic ever made in the US. And they use that Bakelite to make radios, kitchen kitchen equipment, bags, Bakelite bracelets, and buttons. And the artisans would take so much time and effort and love to make those really cute little buttons that look like a little dynamite, a little valve that is in one of my artwork, which is a heart, and like just fish, something that looks like fish lips. I mean, if you come to the gallery and see the exhibition, you will see in detail, and it's really hard to see it in the internet. You really kind of have to come to the gallery and see it for yourself, because those stitches and pieces of buttons are really kind of like really special, and it's really hard to not to see it unless you look at it with your naked eye. So I like to do that. And also all the textiles are are from repurposed textiles. A lot of them are old and vintage, found textiles, and some from tailor shops, some from quilting shops. All of these, just keeping in line with Boro, the art of mending and repurposing. For me, I try to follow the whole philosophy during the entire time I worked with this project in 2 years, even from the frames, which I asked one of my artist friends to do frames from wood that she found on the beach, from wood she found from broken down fences in the countryside. She and her boyfriend would go out and search for it. I'd say, please help me. I need this size. She goes, Winnie, I'm going out this weekend. So I'm gonna find it for you. And then and textiles, I would just, my daughter was like cutting her pants, making it shorter. I said, can I go with you? So I would go there and I saw this whole box, this bin of all kinds of fabrics. And I would ask the one who was doing was a little Japanese woman, can I get some of these fabrics from you? She goes, yeah, really? You need it? Go ahead. So I started getting some, like, I was picking the ones, oh, this looks nice. I think I could use this, whatever. So it's like, although it's so easy to just go to a store and just give me 1 yard of that, 1 yard of that, 1 yard of that, I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to follow the philosophy. So I really went to all these places to search for those lost fabrics or unwanted fabrics, because I wanted to give it back some life. So everything I used, even when I was doing the shadow boxes within the frames, were all also repurposed acid-free backing. So everything really I tried to follow along the lines of that. So so it would serve my purpose. Well, the first year I started making it, I was in Manila. And that was the time we were all cooped up in the house. So I said to myself that I would make good use of my time because instead of worrying about COVID, I said I would make it a fulfilling time for me, a time of discovery, a time of learning, and a time to make myself joyful instead of worrying so much about COVID. So I started getting fabrics, and even when I couldn't even find the things, I couldn't go out, right? So I went through my cabinet, looked at things that were old, I tore it apart. I looked for blankets which I didn't use, I tore it apart, fabrics. I even got one of my husband's old shirt, tore it apart, and I started stitching like a crazy woman. Every day I was stitching left and right, doing the whole shibori methods because at that point I had the shibori thread, which is the Japanese thread, which I just really love. And I just kept on doing it like a meditation without thinking what would happen at the end. And frankly, I really had no idea. I had a whole box of buttons in front of me, all this thread, all these textiles starting from nothing, and started to just work slowly, slowly, day by day, without the thought of what would happen at the end. And through that 2 years, it just developed. I started to think, I think I'd like to do this, do that. And 1 year later, I went to the US. I moved to a different location, and I spent some time in another room, and started to create that space for myself in order to continue. And so at the end, I felt a lot of the work, which originally was an idea, became layers and layers upon layers until finally it reached the story I wanted it to tell. So that's so actually we look at my work, each work has a story. Each work has a personal experience. Each work actually is about challenges, risks, it's about forgiveness, it's about sorrow, it's about grieving, it's also about moments of joy with my children, it's about enlightenment. So there's just so many things I learned through these 2 years. And so because I said to myself, these 2 years could go to waste, but I will not let it go to waste. So that's what happened in the last 2 years. It was for me pretty amazing. The Beating Heart or the Eternal Beating Heart, something like that, right? I'm trying to remember the title. And that heart is actually the heart of my dad because he had actually passed away, and before that he had gone through surgery, things like that. And I think that's something we all probably can relate to when our parents are getting older. We finally see how things break down, in their body, things like that. And so when you look at that heart, it's also from repurposed fabric and many kinds of valves and buttons. The valves, the stents that you put into your heart. And then there's a little small dynamite I put in there, a little small dynamite button, because everything there are either textile or buttons. Even the little dynamite I found that is a button. So I sewed it in there because sometimes I feel you're either so in love, so angry, so disappointed that your heart will explode. So it's like a comical thing that I put that little dynamite button there. Steph, that's actually one of my favorite works because it also comes from a personal experience. When you see, it's entitled "Hanging by a Thread," and in that work you will see a little person hanging with his hands hanging like that, but that small. And then in the middle is a big jacket which has been borrowed. And then on the right is a really funny, cute little bra that I just stitch in there just for fun. And so in the left one, you see a little person. And that little person actually signifies probably myself when I was in chef school a couple of years ago. And the jacket is my chef jacket, which is that jacket which by hook or by crook every morning when you go into work, because I worked in a kitchen in a very it was a one Michelin star kitchen, which is very strict. And every day you better be there with a clean chef jacket and right on time. And my person, which is this small, really meant that not that much to them for as long as I was there with my clean jacket, this big, doing my job. So it's like the personality of a human being versus what you're there for in your stage. So that's why I did it like that. And I think also, if you would relate it to COVID times, I felt a lot of people were really hanging by a thread, if you think about it. For the last 2 years, all of, especially the first year, you've never been vaccinated. You're wondering, are you going to die or not? Are you going to make it? So we're all, I think this is the first time this generation or the younger generation or our generation living today have ever experienced such a thing. It's not like during the time of the Spanish flu. It's similar, but it's now in today's world where people really are wondering, am I going to survive this until the vaccine came out? Even then, we all know we have to be careful. So I think that hanging by a thread is something I think a lot of people can really relate to during. Since it took me actually 2 years to do this body of works, I think I decided that I wouldn't be in a hurry to have an exhibition unless I knew for sure it's really something special I wanted to do. A lot of times I think we think as an artist we do one thing and we stick to it when in fact when you're an artist and you want to create something, it's good to kind of do different kinds of things, and from ceramics I'm now doing textile because I really love the feel of textile. And I think it's just so amazing even to look into drawing and all kinds of things because everything is an adventure. And I think so let's see, because it's about opening your eyes to any possibility and just being totally like a child, loving everything you do and bringing the passion into any kind of art form. And let's see, because I think there are endless possibilities. So let's see. I really don't want to promise anything, but I think for the next 2 years, I'm going to search and see what else I can do that would bring me joy, touch my heart, be soul searching, as well as hopefully bring joy to those who own my works. So let's see what happens.